I am Andrew Johnson, Commission Chair. The purpose of the Development Review Commission is created to hold public meetings and hearings to provide analysis and recommendations to the City Council regarding general land use policies and applications where the Commission has recommendatory power, and to render final decisions on specified applications where the Commission has final decision-making power, including but not limited to all aspects of a proposed and future development. The Development Review Commission recognizes that the creation of a desirable environment throughout the city for residents, businesses, and industry is a prime requisite for the interdependence of land values, aesthetics, and good site planning by promoting harmonious, safe, attractive, and compatible development that is therefore considered to be in the best interest of public health, safety, and general welfare. Any person aggrieved by a final decision of the Development Review Commission may file an appeal to the City Council within 14 calendar days after the Development Review Commission has rendered its decision. Development Review Commission recommendations to the City Council are not final decisions. Tonight with us on the commission, on my right, we have Commissioner Stefan Richter, Larry Tom, Vice Chair Michelle Schwartz. On my left, Joe Forte, Linda Spears, and Barbara Lloyd. With us tonight from the city, we have Jeff Tamilevich, Ryan Levake, Michelle Dalkey, Diana Kaminsky, Rebecca Rothman, Karen Stovall, Jacob Payne, Lucas Jensen, Whitney Mayfield, Joanna Berry, and Jason Wolf. Anyone that has come tonight wishing to speak, you will be given up to 3 minutes to speak, and staff will be monitoring the time. Also, please note that our WebEx chat box is not monitored or moderated. All right, so first we will consider item number 2, which is consideration of meeting minutes. Could I get a motion for the approval of items 2A and 2B? Anybody?
I'll make a motion
Vice
to
Chair?
approve the study session and regular meeting minutes from November 12th.
Thank you. The motion for approval has been submitted. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And that's seconded by Commissioner Tom. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and that passes unanimously. Next up, I will review our consent agenda. During our study session, the commission identified items we would prefer to have on consent. If there's anyone here tonight wishing to speak about one of these items, please get my attention and we can pull that item from our consent agenda. So on our consent agenda tonight, we have item 3A, which is Warner Crossing. Was anyone wishing to speak on that tonight? Okay, so that will be on our consent agenda. The next item is item 4C, which is Korean barbecue. That will remain on our consent agenda. Item 4D, Castro's. Okay, that will also remain. Item number 4E, Dafdar residents. Okay. Item number 4F, Camden Carport. Okay, item number 4I, Bear residents. Okay, and then item number 4J, Blachos family. All right, so those items will remain on our consent agenda. Okay, thank you. And we will vote on all of those as I've identified them. So can I get a motion for approval of our consent agenda? Commissioner Spears.
I move the approval of the consent agenda.
Okay, approval has been made by Commissioner Spears. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Lloyd. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and that passes unanimously. So the items we will be hearing tonight are items 4A, item 4B, and item 4G. So we will start with item 4A, which is Bala fencing. And I believe Mr. Jensen will be starting that one. Is that correct?
the applicant's online if you want me to try to unmute them.
Yeah, we have the applicant online on that one.
Applicant is online. I can try unmuting them. I assume it's, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant is online and can make a presentation from there.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they were ready to make a presentation, but we,
Two people on here with the same name, so I'm hoping I get the right one.
okay.
I'm sorry, it's
Upward Architects, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one.
Mr. Brian Hernandez. Yeah.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Great, great, thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Please proceed with your presentation.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a formal presentation. I got something sent to me earlier and I was looking for it as far as virtual, being able to. I think what I was told is obviously I got reported for infringing upon a 20-foot line from the street. And so I guess that's what this is about.
Okay. All right, are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. We will turn it over to Mr. Jensen from staff for a presentation.
Staff slides. Yeah. I was like, I hope so. Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. That's okay. All right. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. Lucas Jensen, Planner 2, City of Tempe Planning Division. This request for bala fencing, the PL 230045, is a request for a use permit to allow up to a 6-foot high wall in the front yard building setback for bala fencing. This is at 2920 South Bala Drive. It's located at the end of Bala Drive, which is a cul-de-sac, the rear yard being adjacent to the Shalimar Golf Course, nearest to the 101 and Southern Avenue intersection. As he said, the applicant was cited by code a few years back for the wall exceeding 6 feet in the front yard setback and is in for the use permit to allow the increased height within the front yard setback. These are the context photos and elevations of the fence. I thought it was onerous to expect black line elevations, so these suffice, with the tape measure indicating that they're, when you zoom in on a PDF, you can see that it's measured at 5 foot 6 inches. So it is within that 6 foot limit that we allow a use permit for. It's a CMU construction with a mechanical gate and then some breeze block on the east side there you can see. This is the site plan showing the fence, so it's just along that southwestern portion. It extends across the driveway over towards the property line and then along the property line with the adjacent owner for a ways. I did call out that the measurement according to the Maricopa County Assessor's website is about 11 feet, not the 18 feet 20 inches. There's been conditions to address that discrepancy. We didn't see it necessary to require a survey be done to locate this for the use permit process. I just wanted to note that the property line does not line up with the back of sidewalk, so the 18-foot measurement on that plan is slightly off. The approval criteria for our use permit, it meets our criteria for addressing vehicular and pedestrian traffic, still providing there's no changes to the rest of the site except for the wall. We did make sure that there was adequate site visibility, so pulling in, pulling out wouldn't necessarily be an issue with an 11-foot distance. No nuisances. We're not expecting any particular deterioration or loss of property values. The contacts with the surrounding area, we also looked for use permits within that notification radius. We didn't find any within the notification radius. Just noted that it's not completely uncommon for properties to be separated by a physical wall. and the requested height increase is about 1 foot 6 inches, and didn't impact the visibility, and that's kind of our justification for that criteria. And there would be no anticipated nuisances outside of a typical single-family residence. We don't require neighborhood meetings for use permits. We did receive one call and then a few comment cards in opposition. I believe they were from the same individual in opposition to this request. The opposition shared from that property owner, or the adjacent property owner, was that there was concerns about neighborhood character, and the precedent that's been set in the neighborhood is not consistent with having excessive walls of an excessive height in the front yard. They shared concerns about the impacts to the visual appeal and openness of their property directly adjacent. And their primary concern is that the wall does block a portion of their home being visible when looking down the cul-de-sac, and block some of their visibility when looking out of their home because of the angle of this. You can see that existing building there to the south their view is partially blocked to Bala Drive with that fence. That being said, we did find that it meets our conditions for a use permit, and our recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions. The only non-standard condition of approval is that the wall shall not be moved or relocated any closer to the front property line than its current location. And available for any questions.
Questions? Vice Chair?
Yeah, so if I heard correctly, it has been in place for some time. I guess, was it just standard code compliance that notified your group about the condition, or was there a complaint?
So I do not recall if this was I believe this was an anonymous complaint to code compliance. I would have to check that, but it was cited by code compliance back in December of 2022, so a couple of years ago now. And then it's taken quite some time to get here. I know the case was closed before this was processed, and then the application sat for a while before it was actually deemed complete, having all of the required information. But it was the result of an anonymous complaint, I believe.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a question. So how many linear feet are not in compliance?
So
Do we know?
It's difficult to say. The site plan is not quite accurate, seeing that it's measured 18 feet and the assessor's giving it 11. I think there's a discrepancy in what was measured. I think there was issues when the contractor came out to build the fence as well. I would estimate it's maybe 20-ish feet of linear wall, but that's a little bit of a guess there. You can, if we can,
That corner
let's
area?
see. Yeah, it measures 27 and a half feet long.
But it's not the entirety of
It
that.
would not be the entirety of the wall, no.
And it's too high by how many feet?
1 foot 6 inches.
Many times when we have these come before us before they're built, the staff requires some kind of visibility, some kind of breeze block or something else on top, maybe a wrought iron on top, something that would provide visibility. Is that something that was considered in this circumstance? Since it's already been built, I guess that's a little challenging.
Yeah, that wasn't something that was discussed or considered as the fence was already built, but that's something that could be addressed through conditions if need be.
I have a question.
Commissioner Tom?
How far is the adjacent neighbor setback? Do we know?
What's their setback?
Yeah, how with the actual how far is a building back from the property line, or
That-
from I guess the sidewalk property line? Because I'm a planner, but visually
Yeah, you're talking about the adjacent property?
correct.
I don't know if I can posit an accurate guess on that one. It does appear that it's set back further than the typical minimum required, but I don't have a number.
Okay, but it is a little bit different because it's on a cul-de-sac, right?
That's correct, yeah.
A little bit further back than normal.
Yeah, and the angle of that property line in regards to visibility from the home, it makes it difficult when thinking about it. I think even if that was built at the setback line, it might come close to blocking visibility just due to the configuration of those two lots.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Spears?
That's an area of custom homes, and there is no commonality in terms of what you see in a typical residential development, because the setbacks are all different, and the houses are all different. Their fencing is all different. Their only commonality is backing up to the golf course.
Other questions? All right, thank you. We will now move on to public comments. So I believe we have one person online who wishes to speak about this item, and then I don't have any comment cards.
Just have Michael Doyle. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute him.
Mr. Doyle, please restate your name and
Okay.
your city of residence.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm the neighbor. I live in Tempe. I live in that adjacent house that was talked about during the presentation on 2926 South Bala Drive. The presenter, that site plan picture really kind of captures my biggest issue. I was probably the one that called this in. I figured it was fine. I figured it was within code, and I was kind of surprised that it wasn't all this time. Anyways, to cut to the chase, though, the fence is very high, and nowhere in the neighborhood do you have a wall in the front yard. If you guys can go back to that site plan, you can see like my entire front yard on that would be the right side of my yard. I guess that would be the northern side of right there. My entire front yard has, a 5.5 foot fence right all along the side of it. It just seems very high. It makes my property feel very, very closed off. And yeah, this picture does a good justice. Even when you drive down the road, as you're looking at my home, you see this massive block fence, just gray blocks, cinder blocks. You don't really see my home until you come to the arc of the cul-de-sac, and then you're right in front of my home, then you can see my home. But up the road, when you're driving down the road, it's just this massive block concrete structure that blocks, a good portion of my home, about half of my home. And so and also I've got a patio right there in the front yard. I've got artificial turf that we play on, and it just makes it feel very, very closed off. And then the last thing I would say is kind of what I was mentioning. You go around the neighborhood and there's fences and walls in the front yards, but they're all small, 2 feet, maybe 4 feet high. It closes off like a little patio. There's nowhere in my neighborhood that has that high of a wall in the front yard. And so it kind of makes this home kind of stand out. It, kind of the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood is kind of disrupted by that. But most importantly, it's really about how much my home it blocks off from the street. And also from when I'm in my front yard or my front door, or in the bedroom right there behind that patio, I just see this big cinder block wall outside my window. And I'll conclude there. Thank you for giving me the time.
Yes, thank you for coming tonight. All right, with that, if there are no other public comments, I will transition back to the applicant. If the applicant would like to make any comments to what he has heard tonight.
Hey, yeah, thank you guys. So if you go back, I don't know if we can go Google Maps and do a street view right now. There's
I don't
actually
think we can, no. sorry.
Okay, there's probably a 7-foot tall bush that's at the end of that fence line, in between the fence line and the street. So if you were coming down that road, you would see a huge bush. It's over to the left. You can't see it you can see it in the top right picture. There's to the left of that, you'll see a bush starts there. So if you come down the street, you're going to see a huge bush, and then you're going to see my fence. So to Mr. Doyle's feedback based on his, and I mean, if you can look right there into that left picture, you can see the turf in the front porch, which were added after the fence was added, just so you guys know. And obviously, Mike and I had, Mr. Doyle and I had a little incident a while back where he threatened to kill my dog. So we had a little problem, and I wanted to make sure that we, utilized as much of the space as we could. And then the height of the wall is for privacy. That's why people build fences.
All right, any questions for the applicant?
Thank you guys, by the way.
All right, thank you. Would staff like to present any additional information to us? No, Mr. Jensen, okay. I'm wondering if we have room for a condition to consider some modification to the fence to create some visibility in that fence. I think that's our prerogative. What's that? Did you have something, Mr. Richter? Yes.
Would the applicant be amenable to, it sounds like the wall was 1'6" too tall per what was allowed. So would the top two courses, would the applicant be amenable to replacing the top two courses with something more decorative and breeze block, like other walls that are in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously open to whatever we can do to fix it. I think 1.5 feet, if he's in his living room and he's challenged facing out and saying that half of his house or this front portion of his house is tough to see out of, will 1.5 feet do that justice? Will he be able to be comfortable with, if I go out there with a, I guess, a hammer or something and lower, right, the 2.5 feet off of the top of that all the way back to where it's, I believe 20 feet. Is that right? I can certainly do that. Or, I don't know if you guys, you said something about a decorative cinder block style or look. But yeah, I mean, I'm open to, making sure that everybody's happy, obviously. But I think if taking 1.5 feet off, that makes the neighborhood or the neighbors happy, will they see that much more sign of light based on 1.5 feet removal?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, when this type of a request is made before the wall is built, the city will typically require some kind of visibility, some kind of sight capability through that wall, whether that's through wrought iron or through breeze block. So what's happened here is the city never had that opportunity to provide that feedback and incorporate something like that into this wall. So I think that's
So
why
when you
this
say,
question came up.
just to interject, so when you say that like a breeze, the style of the cinder block,
Like
which
you
I
have
have,
on the rest of your wall, on the opposite side of your gate.
if I do that, it'll be facing north and south, which would just allow the Doyles to look in my backyard and me to look in their front yard, right? Because the wall's snug up against their property. So if I put something in the front, then it wouldn't affect the Doyles. If I put something on the side, then they would just see in my backyard and I would see in their front yard, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not clear which portions of the wall are in violation of our code. So I think it's a little difficult to describe exactly which portions of the wall it would be impacted.
Yeah, because it just comes down to that end one that's encroaching upon the standard. I think it's 20 feet, and I think I don't know. It's been different measurements because there's some additional. Like we looked at it from the sidewalk where the driveway was and straight back to the fence, and obviously that wasn't it. So we're off by a few feet, I think.
Okay. Would Mr. Jensen like to interject?
Yeah, could we pull up that site plan one more time? Thank you. Okay. So looking at this, I think staff could, recommend a condition that reads the west portion of the wall adjacent to the neighboring property shall be cut down to 4 feet high and 1'6" of breeze block be added to the top course of the wall. This would only apply, like you are aware, within that 20-foot front yard setback. Oh, can you? No? Yeah.
I'm assuming that's what you mean right there.
There you go.
Yeah, it would effectively cut that corner off and then be consistent with the 20-foot front yard setback.
I don't know where that is. That's on, it's over here. You want to come grab this mouse?
Sure.
Zoomed in.
We'd be looking roughly here to there, that portion of the fence,
Mhm.
20 feet from the property line back, and then a 20-foot measurement that way. So you're maybe looking, like we said, about 20 to 30 feet maximum of their wall being replaced with.
2 courses, approximately.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're good. I think we have some commissioner discussion now to go over. So we'll close out the public comment period and move on to commissioner discussion. So I think what it's boiling down to is that I think there's some support for the addition of a condition, and there's some support for potentially approval as written. So I'd be willing to entertain any additional conversation or a motion. Vice Chair?
Yeah, in general, I feel like it is an upgraded wall. I mean, we don't often see architectural block in a residential, or as often as we see standard block on stucco. So I'm appreciative of the fact that it is an upgraded feature. I do not think the condition of approval is necessary at this point, given the actual view that it would change. So I'd be willing to entertain them, or I guess we can have more comments.
You
If others would like to.
okay, so any other conversation before a motion? Commissioner Spears?
I agree with Vice Chair. I think that what we're coming up with solutions are worse than what we already have. And it's unfortunate that we're dealing with it after the fact instead of, other than requiring the fence be torn down and rebuilt, that's the only solution, and I don't know that's reasonable, so.
Commissioner Tom?
Yeah, I agree with our other commissioner comments. I don't think putting breeze block at the top fixes the situation. It's unfortunate that they built this fence without permits, or without establishing where the property lines were, so they can get it built correctly. It'd be very hard for me to support this request. I think it causes an adverse impact on that surrounding property, that property owner to the south. Kind of cuts off his view. Even if we put breeze block at the top, the view's still cut off.
Commissioner Richter?
I would agree with not being able to support it only because there is nothing else in the neighborhood that looks like it. It doesn't, there's no other 6-foot walls anywhere else on any of the streets nearby. So it does kind of stick out, and it does affect the neighboring property.
And just, if I may, there is 6-foot walls on, right around the corner on Balboa. So even though there may not be directly on that, and there are the houses there, again, some of the custom houses have front walls with no windows, and so it's not peculiar to the neighborhood. And certainly as you go farther down there, zero lot line homes that all have 8-foot walls around them in the front yards. So the character of the neighborhood, if so, not on this particular stretch of the street, but there are walls on Balboa.
Thank you, Commissioner Spears.
I guess
Commissioner Lloyd,
I would
yes.
question, are those conforming to standards as well, or are they in violation? Because I do think, again, if we had the opportunity to do this correctly, we would have a different outcome, and I do think it does have an adverse effect on the immediate neighbor. So if something like this were built directly next door to me, I would also have an issue with the fact that it's not conforming to code. So I have a hard time supporting it as well. And regardless of the outcome, I hope no animals are harmed because of it.
I think we can all agree on that. Commissioner Forte.
So I would say that I understand the neighbor's point of view. I'm looking at it in Google View and I see a beautiful wide open into the fairway or whatever you call it, but you can't really dictate your neighbor not having a fence around his property. So I would be in favor of the condition as is.
Okay. With that, I would like to hear a motion. Commissioner Spears.
I move for the approval of PL 230045.
Okay, approval. A motion has been submitted for approval by Commissioner Spears. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice Chair Schwartz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, so Commissioner Forte, Commissioner Spears, myself, and Vice Chair Schwartz are in approval, and those against, please raise your hand. Okay, with Commissioner Lloyd, Commissioner Tom, and Commissioner Richter in dissent. Thank you. Lost my word. Okay, so that motion passes 4-3. All right, so we'll move on to item number 4B, which is Brandenburg property. Let's see, the applicant is Jennifer Brandenburg. Would you please approach and provide your presentation? Oh.
Hopefully council's okay if Andrew Brandenburg, I think
we'll have Andrew
intimidated by you guys, so I'll do the presentation if that's okay.
Sure.
Thanks.
That works. So state your name and city of residence and
Andrew Brandenburg, city of residence is Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Our kids basically reside at this residence going to ASU.
Okay.
So the first slide, we use the little clicker there. Thank you. So the first slide, just again, what we're asking for is to, first I wanted to say thank you to Diana and Logan. They've been helpful in this process. I was hoping to present something that was very simple, although staff has identified a few items that we're humbly requesting that you guys support the approval of. Sure. Better? All right. Sometimes I guess it should be shorter. So again, we're requesting 2 spaces in the front offset, 2 parking spaces. We're cleaning up an error that we made by removing a damaged garage door and putting a wall up to make that into some sort of living space, storage, bedroom, office, that type of a condition. So we're basically asking for 2 spaces in the front yard offset, not completely in the offset. It's about half of the square footage of those 2 spaces will encroach onto the offset, the 20-foot offset. I'll keep the presentation brief. I know we need to do that. The topics I think that are potentially in question are related to parking and then nuisance issues. So that's basically the slides that we put together to justify it. A little bit of an overview, conversion of the existing garage and living space, bedroom. You can see the location, the red dot. In the bottom right is the Google Maps of the property. It is on a cul-de-sac. You can see under the north side, there is a car there. That's where the 2 car spaces are. It's never been, the garage, since we've owned it, hasn't been used for parking. It's been those 2 spaces. and obviously needed for that interior space. And to do that with removing that damaged garage door and putting a wall up, we need the parking in the front. We have been making investments in the property. That is the plan. We plan to own that property at least through the period of time that the kids are in school. We have 3 of them going to ASU. After that, I'm in the aerospace industry. Potentially, it'd be a remote office for me as well. So that's basically what we're doing. Replace the roof, HVAC, in exterior paint, some landscaping work, and we believe that this improvement will add value to the property. So I don't think that's really in question at all. So creating the added space. These are similar approvals that you guys have. I think you actually had a couple approved on the recent docket as well today that are very similar to this of going into that setback. So these are a handful of them recently. I think it's last year, roughly last year, of recent approvals with the same type of requests. The second one is a cul-de-sac as well. The first topic, again, for the approval, one of them that may be in question is the disruptive behavior. Parking and setback will not create a nuisance. I think staff has basically said that in and of itself, parking doesn't have anything to do with that. There has been some tenant misbehavior. Obviously, those tenants are my kids. So we've been working to address those misbehaviors of those kids being a little bit louder than they need to. Nothing with parking, though. I think it's important to know that. It's nothing with parking. There is ample parking, and I'll go through that coming up here. So, again, staff made the comment that disruptive behavior is not anticipated to be affected by the parking. We're looking to invest in the property in the long term. Short-term issues identified by staff are unrelated to the parking offset issue. Ample public parking. There's a couple shots here. You can see within an easy walking on the top right, easy walking distance to 13th Street and South Schaefer. There's plenty of parking. If you count the available spaces of parking in that street, it's roughly 16. And you can see the typical parking is less than 3 on that street. I didn't do a professional study. I'd be glad to do one if that's what's required. But the street parking is typically very minimal, especially on 13th Street in that Schaefer area. One thing that's important to note here is that arrow on the bottom right. You can see that very disruptive parking that was happening there. Some of the complaints, one of which was by my wife because we couldn't even turn around in the cul-de-sac. There was a container in that parking lot, abandoned cars in front of that property. So some of the communications and the poor neighborhood conditions were reported by us. And again, we're trying to make investments in that property and looking to fix those types of things. So that property has since been sold and has been renovated. So it is has been cleaned up. And then in the bottom left, you can see the picture of the a little bit zoomed in of not only the 2 off-street parking in the driveway, and then the 2 street in green with items 1 and 2. The other thing that I would put on the plate here that that staff and I have talked with about potentially putting a 3rd parking position in that driveway, which would be a potential option and could make sense as a solution. But as submitted, it's just basically looking for the 2 items be in the offset. And then in conclusion, please approve my request for parking in the front offset. Obviously, it's very similar to various other ones that you've done. We were trying to deal with any disruptive issues that may have come up in the recent past. And again, there's ample parking on the street. A study would show that there's very low use of those 16 spaces on Schaefer Street. So with that, thank you. Is there anything else I need to do?
Questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Mr. Zappolo.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Logan Sapolo, Planning Technician for the City of Tempe Planning Division. Before you, we have a request for Brandenburg property, PL 240201. I'd like to begin with addressing the properties brought up previously. I did do a study into each one of those properties and their addresses, and given the I believe it's 9 use permits that they brought up similar to their case. None of the given properties have all of the 4 of the same property characteristics as the Brandenburgs do on their property. 5 bedrooms on a cul-de-sac, 1 allowed on-street parking that's not impacting their neighbor's lot, and then also is a rental property. Looking at the staff presentation given, this request, ZUP 240055, is a request for a use permit to allow 2 required parking spaces in the required front yard building setback. It's on Lot 41 in the Starlight Manor subdivision. This was the result of a former garage that was converted to a 5th bedroom without building permits. Loss of the garage parking, as we know, requires the driveway to become the primary parking spaces for this residence. On the second slide here, we have our site plan. Shown by the dotted black line is the property line. The interior black line would be the, oh, that's the setback line. My apologies for the dotted black line. And then the solid black line on the interior would be the property line there. So they are encroaching the front yard building setback of the 20 feet there, with the minimal side being 25.5 feet and then the longer side being 30 feet to their property line. This is an image of their front elevation after the garage conversion. So they did include a window and then just match the existing wood structure of the original home. This is the submitted overall floor plan of the site, including the 5th bedroom conversion. So as we can see, looking through, they have 5 bedrooms, and then they do enter through a hallway / laundry pathway there with a door egress on the east side. Looking into our approval criteria for use permits, any significant increase in vehicle or pedestrian traffic. It is not anticipated that allowing required parking within the front yard building setback alone will result in a significant increase in vehicular or pedestrian traffic. The property is a single-family rental property, and 2 required parking spaces will be provided, subject to approval of this use permit. Furthermore, the site configuration on a cul-de-sac allows for only 1 on-street parking space without impacting the adjacent neighbors. Looking into the second approval criteria for use permits, nuisance arriving from the emission of odor, dust, gas, noise, vibration, smoke, heat, or glare at a level exceeding that of ambient conditions. Parking 2 vehicles in the driveway is not expected to create a nuisance exceeding that of ambient conditions. However, being located on the cul-de-sac does limit the on-the-street parking to 1 compact car without impacting the adjacent properties. If the property has any more than 2 cars parked in the driveway and 1 parked on the street in front of the property, it could create a nuisance for adjacent properties. Looking into condition approval 3, contribution to the deterioration of the neighborhood or to the downgrading of property values. Parking in the front yard building setback is permitted in the R16 zoning district subject to the approval of this use permit. There have not been any use permits issued to allow parking within the front yard building setback within 600 feet of this property. If demand for parking exceeds what is available on site and results in on-the-street parking in front of adjacent properties, it will reduce available parking for the neighboring properties. Criteria number 4, compatibility with existing surrounding structures and uses. Based on Google Street View and aerial surveys of the site, most of the properties in the immediate area utilize garages or carports for the required parking spaces. In analyzing the character of Schaefer Street, it appears that driveways are primarily being used for additional parking and not the required parking on the lots. And then criteria number 5, adequate control of disruptive behavior both inside and outside of the premises, which may create a nuisance to the surrounding area or general public. Disruptive behavior is not anticipated specifically from parking 2 cars in the front yard building setback, but due to substantial number of calls for service to the property, however, and the applicant's letter of explanation, which clearly indicates there will be no changes to the control of disruptive behavior on the site, it is anticipated that disruptive behavior on the property will continue to create a nuisance for the surrounding area. I did note those code enforcement violations in the history and facts. And then we also did have another call just on November 15th of 2024. So pretty recently for excessive parking in the front yard without a use permit. Public involvement, there's no neighborhood meeting required for use permits. And then public input, I have received 3 calls in opposition to this project, expressing concerns with parking issues on this lot and 1 complaint that was submitted for an unpermitted garage, which is being addressed through the Building Safety Division, which is the result of this use permit. For the recommendation and special conditions, our staff recommendation is to deny this use permit. Should the commission determine the use complies with the criteria and approve the use permit, staff has recommended conditions of approval. The non-standard conditions of approval that we have submitted to the commission, if complaints are received regarding excessive parking and/or disruptive behavior, verified by the Community Enhancement Division and the City Attorney's Office, the use permit may be required to return to the applicable decision-making body for reconsideration. And then also, parking in the front yard setback shall be limited to 2 vehicles at a time. It should be noted that these parking in the front yard setback shall be only on improved surfaces, and by our city code cannot be on the lawn parking. That is all from me. Is there any questions?
Questions for staff? Commissioner Spears?
Has the building permit been applied for?
Building permit has been applied for. It was denied and then bounced to our planning division to go through with the use permit prior to resuming that building permit.
Okay, so that the building permit will have to be approved before the use permit becomes effective.
That is correct.
Thank you.
So I do have a question. If we go with a staff recommendation, what is the process then for the applicant?
The process for approval would be to get approval for the use permit. You guys would approve it. We'd issue our Development Review Commission letter of approval, and then they would go through building permits for the garage conversion to ensure structural components are adequate.
Staff's recommendation for denial, then they would have to take down
correct.
the garage.
Correct. They would have to remove the garage conversion if you guys approve our recommendation of a denial. My apologies.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions?
All right. At this time, I would like to invite Drew Yoakum, the Director of the Code Compliance Division, to speak on the behalf of this property as well.
Welcome.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Chairman and members of the commission. Excuse me. My name is Drew Yoakum. I'm the Deputy Community Development Director here with the City of Tempe over the Community Enhancement Division. And I'm here just to provide a brief history of enforcement activity taking place at 1318 South Schaefer Drive for your consideration tonight. Over the past year, Code Compliance has had 2 separate cases, the first one beginning in March 11th, 2024. This case was initiated after receiving multiple calls from the public complaining about accessory structures in the backyard, including stages that were built and utilized for nuisance parties, junk trash and debris throughout the front and rear yard, illegal dumping of materials and junk trash and debris in the alleyway, overheight grass and weeds that are not maintained, and unregistered vehicles that were stored in the driveway. During the course of that case, 7 inspections took place, resulting in multiple violations of notices to try and achieve compliance with the property owner as well as the residents. Since the staff report that you guys received on October 21st, another case on November 15th, 2024 was initiated. Again, this was for complaints received from the public for junk trash and debris in the backyard and in the alleyway, and then also not meeting the parking requirements that we're discussing tonight. 3 inspections have taken place so far on that. I also want to talk briefly about the Tempe Police Department and some of the concerns that they have at this location. So over the past year, 7 public complaints have gone to the Tempe Police Department for nuisance parties taking place at this location, resulting in 6 nuisance party citations issued by officers on site, including 2 recent loud party citations that again have taken place after the report you received, one on November 5th and one on November 13th. There was an additional warning that was issued over the past year that did not result in a citation. One of those investigations is still ongoing from Tempe Police, including issues including sexual assaults that have taken place during one of the parties. And then after the parties, there have been 6 joint home visits from Tempe Police, as well as ASU, to speak with residents on site about nuisance citations, party citations, and failing to follow the ASU Code of Conduct. And then as mentioned briefly, the other enforcement action is from the Building Safety Division for 1 case resulting in the unpermitted enclosure of the garage. And that's all I have. Thank you. But I can answer any questions if you have.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, was there anyone here tonight wishing to speak, from the public wishing to speak on this case? If so, please fill out one of these cards and bring it up to the front. And no one online? Okay. With that, we will close the public comment period. At this point, I think it's appropriate to ask the applicant if there's any additional comments you would like to provide after our public comment period.
Yes. It's very hard to hear some of the comments specifically around the code compliance, so apologize for that. Disappointed with that. Some of that information is the first we're hearing of it. So like I've noticed, we received the information that was in Logan's report, and that has been addressed. The details of everything that was communicated there was way more than what's in Logan's report. So obviously we need to do some work with properly dealing with the tenants, which are kids. So understand. And again, I think it's also important that, again, this is for a use permit for 2 parking spaces. Those other issues are addressed by law, and the use permit theoretically is separate from those issues. So I guess that's all I would say.
Thank you. Anything additional from staff before we move on? No? Okay. All right. Commissioner discussion. Commissioner Spears.
This is a hard one because unfortunately the issues that are going on really don't have anything to do with the use permit. It's a parking issue, and they have to deal with the enclosure of the garage that has necessitated the use permit requirement for parking. And I would hope that in the building permit process that some of these security issues would be addressed, and they would have if in fact it's being used as a fraternity house or rental property, that there would be police standards, that crime prevention standards that would be applied as part of the building permit. But it's a hard one. I mean, because unfortunately the violations don't really relate to what the use permit request is for.
Commissioner Lloyd?
Thank you. I agree with that, and I agree with the applicant that we're talking about, parking as it relates to this use permit. I guess I think that if we empathize with that position, we still can support the city and have an out if they do have, one more violation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so with that in mind, I would consider approving it, but with very, very thin ice, right?
Other comments?
I have a question.
Commissioner Tom?
On condition number 3, it says if complaints are received regarding excessive parking, and or disruptive behavior. How do we assess excessive parking that is going to happen in the street, and how do we assign it to this location and not anyone else within the cul-de-sac?
Are you referring to the other property that was shown with the other cars within the cul-de-sac?
Well, so condition number 3 says that they're to come back to us if there's excessive parking, right? There's the parking in the street right away is public parking. It's not assigned to any one property, correct?
Correct.
So how would excessive parking, if they're providing their 2 spaces, if we were to approve this, they're providing their 2 spaces on site, what would you consider excessive parking?
The excessive parking would be to the definition of what is in our city code, and then also enforced by our Community Enhancement Division. I'm not quite sure if there is a definite number or reasoning behind that city code, but it would be basically under the definitions of excessive parking.
Ms. Kmitzy?
Chair, Commissioner, I think this is something that code enhancement would be able to ferret out in a visit to the site. If they receive multiple calls, neighbors who can't get into their driveway because there's cars parked in front of their driveway that aren't their guests, they show up at the property and they knock on the door and they say, if you have a car on the street, we need to identify whose vehicle's whose. It's going to be fairly clear which vehicles are parked for an event that's at that house. If we have parking on the sidewalk or parking on the lawn, parking in front of other people's driveways, in front of fire hydrants, those are the type of things that they would look for.
Okay, so we're looking at a use permit for 2 spaces within the required front yard setback.
Yes.
If we allow those 2 by approving this use permit, they're in compliance with the zoning ordinance for their required spaces.
Correct.
But we're trying to cover other events that may occur, or are we trying to cover other residents that are living at that site?
So with the intensification of adding the 5th bedroom, in the zoning code allows up to 5 bedrooms to have no more than 2 spaces. Those 2 spaces normally are on site in a garage or a carport with a driveway that then serves for guest parking and whatever spaces are available on the street. With the removal of the garage, which is the primary parking spaces, you are now requiring the only 2 primary parking spaces to take place in the driveway, which eliminates guest parking on site, which transfers more parking to the street front, which is allowed as public parking. But if you have every house on the street add a 5th bedroom and everybody wants to park their cars, eventually you run into a deficit of parking availability.
Is guest parking a code requirement?
Not for single family, but I use the example of it's the Thanksgiving test. Everybody on the cul-de-sac wants to have family or friends over for Thanksgiving dinner. At some point you run out of places to park. Guest parking is typically on the driveway of single-family homes, which is why it's not a requirement of the code. It's part of the driveway that's there.
But if it's not a requirement, I don't see how we require them to do it then.
Well,
Either in the street or on their property, right?
The use permit is the way of evaluating if the situation meets the criteria or not. And so their required parking is in a driveway, or excuse me, in a carport or garage. Allowing them to turn the driveway into their primary parking space pushes any other demand for parking, whether it's tenants or guests, off of their property into the public right-of-way.
I understand that, but we hear these cases multiple times for kind of the same request. Looking just at the use permit requirements, right? I don't see how this is different from the other requests that we've approved. Now, I understand that there's some activities that are happening that may impact the neighborhood, but I don't think those activities, the approval of a use permit is affecting those requirements. When I see these conditions, I always look at conditions and how we can enforce conditions, right? How does it make it easy for staff to enforce conditions? When there's nothing for staff to stand on ordinance-wise, right? How do they then go to a community, a neighbor, or person that is being cited for something? What do they have to stand on?
The city code. So it may not fall under the zoning ordinance, but it also applies to the city code.
For what?
For nuisance.
In this case?
Nuisance parking, parking on the lawn. And looking at their property, and each of the other cases that Logan mentioned and the applicant mentioned were different considerations. So if the property has less than 5 bedrooms, there's less demand for parking. If it's on a street that has more availability for street parking, then it's less of an issue. In this case, the city code would not allow them to widen the driveway to have a third car. They tried very hard to come up with a design that would widen the driveway to get 3 cars on their property. But because of where they're located in the cul-de-sac, there just physically isn't room without violation of the city code. So there's 2 different codes that apply to this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have comments, Vice Chair?
Yeah, I had a quick question on the condition as listed. It said that if there is a violation, you may be required to return to the applicable decision-making body. So that's also quite ambiguous. So
Sure. We could change that to shall, if that would help. And the idea would be that they would not have to remove the enclosed bedroom, 5th bedroom, until returning to you. So if code enforcement notices them that there's a problem with parking that's been verified by their department and the city attorney's office, we would come back to you for another hearing. And then depending on your decision at that time, they would either have to convert the garage or find another solution to the parking.
Yeah, I think the ambiguity of may is where have a question.
Commissioner Lloyd?
Thank you. I just want to follow up on that and my previous question. So I think the may should be shall, but then also the nuisance part, the violation is really only related to parking then. Like we can't tie any of the other violations, or can we, to this condition?
Condition or criteria number 5 is related to control of behavior on and off premise. So if you can't control the behavior on or off premise, which includes maybe speeding down the street, drunk driving, whatever other occurrences happen as a result of the parking conditions, then it is related to criteria 5.
Commissioner Spears?
Yeah, I'm having a real problem with this because it seems like what you're trying to do is control disruptive behavior, and it really doesn't have anything to do with parking. It has to do with party behavior, whatever. So it's not again, the use permit for the parking isn't going to change the disruptive behavior. That is an issue that has to be addressed outside of, I think, the use permit for parking. And you're absolutely right. We've not seen this kind of language in any of the thousands of use permits we see on a regular basis. So I appreciate what the city is trying to accomplish. I'm just not sure this is the right vehicle.
So I'll jump in here. Thank you, Diana. I'll jump in here. I think this is a chronology question. This is often, actually the majority of these that come to us are asking for forgiveness. They've already done something. In this case, they've converted a garage to a living space, which has intensified the use of that property. It's a larger space. There's more people that can live there because there's more rooms where people can live. That in turn has necessitated the need for additional parking. Now the requirement is only for 2 parking spaces. They don't have that right now because it's in the front yard setback. So what they're asking for is those 2 parking spaces. there is already clear evidence that they have not met the approval criteria from code enforcement, that they have not met the approval criteria for that additional space that is necessitating this parking request. So no other one that has come to us has been this clear in my mind that we should go with the staff recommendation that the approval criteria can't be met, because they've already violated the approval criteria from what I've heard tonight. Adequate control of disruptive behavior, both inside and outside the premises, the one that's right in front of us. Clearly that has not happened in this circumstance. So that's the direction that I am leaning in this one, to go with staff recommendation. I do understand the other arguments on the other side, but I really think this is a clear representation of those examples that we've asked for when we have these on consent all the time. Why aren't we hearing these? Why do these always come to us? And I think this is a very good example of why these come to us, because we have actual, we can contribute to this one, and show that this is one of those examples why these come to us and why we should have input on these kinds of cases.
One more comment.
Yes.
Condition 1, the use permit is valid only after a building permit has been obtained. So if they don't comply with the building requirement, the use permit can't be used. I mean, they're not going to get the use permit until after the building permit. So, and we have had cases where they've done the enclosures, the garage has been enclosed, and someone complains, and then they come back and they have to go through the permit process to get the addition approved before then the use permit is valid for the parking. I'll be happy to make a motion.
Yes, if you'd like to make a motion.
I move for the approval of PL 240201 with the change to condition number 3 that changes the word may to shall be required.
Okay, motion for approval has been made by Commissioner Spears. Is there a second?
Second.
I think Commissioner Richter beat you there. So seconded by Commissioner Richter. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and Commissioner Forte, Spears, Lloyd, Tom, and Richter are in approval. And those in dissent, raise your hand. And myself and Vice Chair are in dissent. So that motion passes 5-2. All right, so next on our agenda is the Sunset Residence. I'd like to call up PF Design Group, please. Is the applicant here tonight?
4G.
Please approach the dais and present your case. If you can state your name and city of residence.
My name's Theodore Peterson, Tempe.
My name is Kathy Brand, 1601 North Sunset Drive.
Thank you.
Do you have opposition to this?
Theo lives in the neighborhood, and he is my architect for this. We are asking for a load-bearing deck. There's a signage in front of the house that appears as if we're building a 2-story. I've asked the city of Tempe if we could actually change the signage. They said no, we have to, when people call in, that they will explain to them that in the backyard is a load-bearing deck. We're taking one deck off and putting another deck in place of it. So I'm asking approval to build the load-bearing deck in my backyard. It's facing east. I have obtained approval from my only neighbor to the north and assured him that the landscaping will be added to maintain the privacy of blocking any views into his yard. Additionally, the neighbors to the west will not be affected because the deck will remain below the roof line and it'll be out of their sight. Adding this deck will add several benefits to the house because we get hit really hard with the west and east sun. It will reduce the amount of heat entering the home, also the reliance on my AC, and the deck will also serve as a peaceful space for enjoying the sunrises, people watching, and enjoying the stargazing that we're having lately. And I would just very much consider my request, and I appreciate your time and dedication. Thank you, Commission.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you for your presentation.
All right, thank you.
And we'll call you back after the public comment period. Okay, Mr. Jensen.
All right. Hello again, Lucas Jensen, Planner 2 still, Planning Division. The request today is for the Sunset Residence. This is a use permit for a second-story addition is what we consider it. Although it's not an enclosed structure, it is a second-story viewing deck, which is required to obtain the use permit per our code. This is located on the corner of North Sunset and East Hancock Drive, nearest the major intersection of Scottsdale and Weber Road. The existing residence in this one is 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. There are no modifications proposed to the interior of the home. This is just the addition of the deck in the rear of the home, and then that would be it. The context photos are a bit blurry, but you can see the top left photo is the rear deck. She mentioned the deck that's going to be removed, and then they'll be expanding in that area. And then photographs from the front of the home. Really the most useful one is that top left photo. The site plan and kind of combined floor plan shows the layout. You see the covered patio there in the rear. It meets our setback requirements of 15 feet. That's measured from the midpoint of the alley on the east side. It is I didn't write down the distance of the awning from the side property lines. I wrote the main building, but it exceeds what is required there. So they're meeting all of our setbacks for that addition to the home. There is also, I'll go to the landscape plan. Sorry. So the landscape plan, like they mentioned, there's ficus hedges on the north side. When this first came in, there were no landscaping. There was no landscaping being proposed, and staff recommended that we would like to see a 5-foot screen privacy wall on the top of that viewing deck to ensure privacy for their only neighbor to the north. And we obtained a signed letter approving of those ficus hedges from that neighbor to the north, so that satisfied staff's concerns in relation to privacy. The elevation, so you can see the south elevation, it has an iron staircase going up to the viewing deck. There's 2 fireplaces, one on the top and one on the bottom. And then that central column is a stucco column there with those stainless steel barbecue doors for small storage. These are the floor plans. So it's an open floor plan. It's just a covered patio. So you can see the extent of that, and then the second-story viewing deck. We find that it does meet our standard approval criteria for a use permit. I'll cover a couple of the additional criteria that we have for use permits specifically for second-story additions. The first is that it's designed to be compatible with the architecture of the residence and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So this is located in the rear of the property. It has the small stucco column in the middle with the fireplace and barbecue, but largely consists of a painted black steel for the railings and staircase. And then for privacy considerations, as I mentioned, they had the property owner to the north sign off and say that the ficus hedges to the north would satisfy that on their end, and staff would then have no concerns for that. No neighborhood meeting is required for this one. We did not receive any public input prior to this. We did just get the one letter from the applicant as part of their submittal process for from their neighbor to the north. Our recommendation would be approve, subject to the conditions. There's no non-standard conditions of approval on this one. Any questions you might have?
Questions? Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we will open up public comment period. I have several cards up here already. If anyone else is here to speak that has not filled out one of these, please bring one up to Ms. Barry and submit it. I will go through these and you will approach, state your name, city of residence, and you will be given your allotted time, which is, I don't know why I'm forgetting this, 3 minutes. 3 minutes to speak, and then the applicant will come back up and address any comments that they've heard. So first up is Lane Caraway. And on deck is Nancy Baker.
Good evening, everybody. I've been a resident of Cavalier Hills, the subdivision where Mrs. Land lives at 1601 for 26 plus years. I pretty much have been active in that community, not only everything north, I've been very active in working with. Since Kathy has come into our neighborhood, purchased a property, she has done major upgrades, which we are starting to see other people want to do the same. Because we all know that when you have a nice neighborhood, nice homes that are maintained, and people that put money into them, it stabilizes the property values. It also keeps some of the riffraff out. Because when your alleyways start deteriorating or your homes start deteriorating, you have all these issues that start secondary effect. I will say I would have liked to have gotten paid for all the people in the neighborhood that contacted me because of the two-story sign. I would hope that the city would do something and redo their codes that, or at least put an addendum in there that says what she is intending to do, because I had 30 plus people from the neighborhood ask me, is she putting a two-story? I said, no, what she's doing. And nobody's gonna be able to see it. She won't be able to look into their properties from the west side, south side. The only way you would see this is when you come in off Hancock. In the view there, you have Top Fuel, coffee parking lot. That's it. So what she's doing is actually beautifying more of our community. And I fully support this, and I can tell you, everybody I spoke to afterwards was really thrilled to death. And we do have a two-story in our neighborhood. And I intended to put a two-story and actually got approval for a two-story. So there is one two-story home in the neighborhood. So with that, I would hope that you guys would approve this so that she can get going with this project and make the neighborhood a lot nicer. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is Nancy Baker. Please come up, state your name, city of residence, and then Kathy Brand would be our last speaker.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, prior to my joining the session today, similar to what Lane mentioned, I had no idea, Kathy, you were talking about a deck.
Yeah.
A deck. So having said that, I too just want to share a bit of a backdrop. My husband and I made a decision to purchase our home based on our residential homes in our neighborhood, the character of Cavalier, and the ease of access to our downtown Tempe. The comments I was about to make and share were based on a two-story home, not a deck. And I know we too live on Hancock. We're 3 houses up from Kathy's. So I would support what it is that Kathy is trying to enhance our neighborhood. It's important to respect the architectural integrity of our 60s style North Tempe neighborhood, and especially since Kathy and Kathy's home is one of 2 homes on Sunset that are the entry point and can then become more of a visual appeal to our Cavalier neighborhood from the Scottsdale Road, Hancock entry. So I suppose one could say I'm withdrawing my conflict and rather support for Kathy and her efforts. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, and last up is Kathy Brand. Oh. Is Kathy Brand here tonight? Oh, you, okay, I'm sorry. You are Kathy Brand. All right, so with that, we will close, or anything you would like to say, I think those were both in support, so you're not required to come back up. All right. So with that, we'll close out our public comment period and move to commissioner discussion or motions. Can I hear a motion, please? Commissioner Forte.
I motion to approve, let me see where, PL 240354.
All right, Commissioner Forte has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tom. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, with that, I think that was our last item. Any commission member announcements? Announcements? Mr. Forte? No? All right, no announcements? City staff announcements?
No announcements, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Next meeting is January 14th after the new year, so happy holidays and happy new year for those that I will not see before then, and we are adjourned. Thank you.